ask you about your decision to run in 2020. When do you think you will actually be closer to making the decision? Because to talk about it very openly like this is not something we always hear this far out.
Yeah, well, I think that you should be straightforward with folks. Mm-hmm. And so I've said that I'm going to make a decision right after the November 6th election. Mm-hmm. I'm focusing my time between now and November 6th on trying to help candidates that are actually on the ballot in this midterm, because I do think that that needs to be the priority for everyone. But right after that, I'm going to make a decision.
That was former HUD Secretary and former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro back in October. Now we know when he'll be announcing his 2020 plans.
I'm pleased today to announce that I've filed paperwork to explore a candidacy for President of the United States. I'm thinking about running for president because I want to make sure that in this 21st century, that same American dream that was there for me will be there for every single man, woman, and child in our country. And I believe that our country is ready for leadership that is trying to bring people together instead of tear them apart. Leadership that has integrity.
Castro says he'll make his plans official on January 12th, and that he's going to spend the next few weeks visiting some early primary states. But he's not the only Texan gaining 2020 attention this week. Let's bring back Ed O'Keefe and Alexi McCammond to talk about this. Ed, let me begin with you. You spoke with Julian Castro earlier today. First of all, what is an exploratory committee, and what did Castro tell you about what he'd focus on as a candidate?
I like to think that an exploratory committee is an excuse to get somebody talked about before they make it official. Essentially,
sounds about
now,
right, yeah.
Right. He essentially now can be legally considered a legit, real, official presidential candidate. And so he will take steps in the next few weeks and spend money in a way that advances a potential presidential campaign. And then come January 12th, flips a switch, and it goes from being an exploratory committee to a full-blown campaign. He's running for president. No matter what legal status he's under, he was running for president when you talked to him a few weeks ago. It's just a matter of sort of dotting I's and crossing T's. And he is one of the earlier, arguably more viable members of the perceived, anticipated 2020 pack to get in and get started. And we'll see. He tells me he will spend time in Iowa. He plans to focus on his native Texas because with the current calendar, early voting begins earlier in Texas, making it more of a factor. He's likely to spend a lot of time in Nevada and California as well, where he thinks that he can make an appeal to Latino voters and to other liberals. And it just dawned on me, Elaine, watching that video. Mm-hmm. Today is the day of the Virgen de Guadalupe. Our Lady of Guadalupe Day.
That explains it. Okay.
That is essentially the patron saint of Mexico. Mm-hmm. Castro is Mexican American. I don't think he did this by mistake.
Right.
It didn't
the
dawn
image
on me
behind
until I saw that moment. Yeah, that image behind him in the video there is Our Lady of Guadalupe. So it was probably a subtle nod to a lot of fellow Mexican Americans and Latinos that he thinks that's a big part of his appeal. Mm-hmm. And what he may ultimately try to do.
Right, as he establishes his identity, right, for people who may not be familiar. So, as you note, it's very interesting to see, for instance, the detail that you just mentioned, right? Things that kind of speak to who he might be, who he is, obviously intending to send a message. None of this is well, we shouldn't be so cynical, perhaps, but it's often the case that these kinds of announcements, or pre-announcements, if you want to call it that, are in fact very carefully orchestrated and intended to kind of be part of the biography as people begin to learn more about a potential candidate. So what's the advantage in getting out there so early?
Well, look, based on my reporting and based on what I think others know, is we anticipate that just after Christmas, just after the new year, others are going to jump in. And they are others who, frankly, may have better name recognition, certainly have more money in the bank. And by many prognosticators who seem to think they know what they're talking about, those people may potentially be in better shape than Castro. So I think by getting out now, he can spend the next few weeks potentially getting out ahead of other opponents, at least for a few extra weeks. But I checked with a few folks today who work for others that are thinking about this, and they said that the Secretary's decision in no way changes their own calculations, and they will stick to announcing this in 2019 at some point.